Hello, everyone. Beginning next month, a countdown starts on 5 developments that are going to impact every homeowner and renter across this country, and with very little warning once they actually arrive. I am not referring to something that could potentially happen. I am talking about a series of changes that is already in motion on a timeline that does not shift and that leaves millions of Americans unprepared anyway because no one tells them to begin getting ready in advance. Today, I am walking you through exactly what is on the horizon, the actual dates, the real numbers as they currently stand, and what you need to do beginning this month so you are not in a panic when September comes and the deadlines are already tightening around you. Before we get into it, subscribe to Senior USA Hub channel and hit the notification bell. These changes arrive whether you are prepared or not, and the relevant agencies, the IRS, HUD, your state housing authority, your mortgage servicer, do not send you a personal heads up to get ready. The people subscribed here receive the information before the deadlines hit. Subscribe now and let us dive in. Change number 1. Mortgage servicers across the country are about to send out escrow adjustment notices for the fall, and the window to understand and respond to those notices before your monthly payment shifts opens right now. If you have a mortgage with an escrow account, your servicer handles the collection of your property taxes and homeowners insurance as part of your monthly payment. Every year, typically in the late summer or early fall, servicers perform what is called an escrow analysis, a review of whether the amount being collected each month is adequate to cover the upcoming property tax and insurance bills. The results of that analysis determine your new monthly escrow payment, and that updated payment takes effect in your September or October billing cycle. In 2026, property tax bills have gone up in a significant majority of U.S. counties, driven by continued appreciation in assessed home values that in many areas has only partially pulled back from the peak years of 2021 and 2022. According to county property tax assessment data compiled this year, the median property tax increase across the country for the 2026 tax year is approximately 6 to 8% above the prior year. In high-growth markets in the South, the Southwest, and parts of the Midwest, increases of 15 to 20% on individual property tax bills are not uncommon. For a homeowner whose annual property tax is $4,200 and whose insurance premium is $1,800, a combined annual bill of $6,000 has historically required a monthly escrow collection of $500. If the property tax increases by 8%, the annual bill rises to $6,144, and the required monthly collection goes up to $512. That is $12 additional dollars per month on the escrow alone. In markets with larger increases, the monthly adjustment can easily be $50, $75, or over $100, producing a meaningfully different mortgage payment with minimal advance notice. Let me give you a more concrete example so the impact is clear for someone managing a fixed income. A retired homeowner in the Phoenix metro area purchased their home in 2019 for $310,000. Their property was assessed in 2024 at $480,000, following several years of substantial appreciation. The 2026 assessment came in at $510,000, an additional 6% increase. Their county's tax rate is approximately 1% of assessed value annually, so their 2026 property tax bill is approximately $5,100, up from $4,800 the previous year. That $300 annual increase translates to $25 additional dollars per month in their escrow payment starting in October. On top of that, their homeowners insurance premium increased by 12% at renewal, adding another $47 per month to their escrow requirement. Total new monthly mortgage payment increase from escrow adjustment alone, $72. On a fixed Social Security income of $2,200 per month, a $72 unexpected payment increase represents over 3% of their monthly income and requires genuine budget planning. The notification they received was a 2-page escrow analysis statement that arrived in mid-August and became effective October 1st. They had fewer than 6 weeks to review, understand, and plan for the change. Had they looked up their property tax assessment in June, they would have had 3 additional months of lead time. Here is why this month matters specifically. Services are required to send you an escrow analysis notice before any payment change takes effect, but the notice period is often as short as 30 days. If you receive that notice in mid-August and your new payment is effective October 1st, you have very little time to plan for the difference or to verify whether the services calculation is accurate, which it sometimes is not. There is also an important error pattern worth being aware of. Services sometimes add an escrow cushion, a buffer above the minimum required to cover the actual bills that exceeds the maximum permitted under Federal Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act rules. RISP limits the escrow cushion to the 16th of the total annual escrow disbursements. If you believe your server is collecting more than this cushion allows, you have the right to request an escrow account review and to receive a refund of any excess amount. This is not a theoretical situation. SEER escrow overages affect a meaningful number of accounts every year, and most homeowners never know to request the review. The action step beginning now. Pull up your most recent mortgage statement and locate your current monthly escrow amount and your current annual property tax and insurance bill. Then look up your county's announced property tax assessment for your property for the 2026 tax year. Your county assessor's website has this information, and searching your county's name plus property tax assessment 2026 will typically take you directly there. Compare what the SEER is currently collecting against what your actual upcoming bills will be. If you notice a significant gap, or if you want to confirm the SEER's eventual calculation is correct, having this information on hand before the notice arrives puts you in a position to review it carefully rather than reacting under time pressure. Escrow errors in the SEER's favor are more common than most homeowners realize, and disputing a calculation is considerably easier before a new payment structure takes effect than after months of incorrect payments. Change number 2, and this is the one that consistently catches homeowners and renters off guard the most. The flood zone remapping cycle that FEMA updates on a rolling basis is generating significant new designations in 2026, and millions of property owners who were not previously in a designated flood zone are now being informed they are, with immediate implications for their insurance requirements and their mortgage terms. FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program updates its flood insurance rate maps, commonly called firm maps, on a continuous basis. But the largest wave of updates in several years is currently working through 2026 for counties across the Southeast, the Gulf Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, and portions of the interior Midwest. When a property is remapped into a special flood hazard area, the designation requires the property owner to purchase flood insurance if they have a federally backed mortgage. For a homeowner who has never needed flood insurance before, the cost of a standard NFIP policy on a residential property can range from $600 to over $3,000 annually, depending on the property's elevation, construction type, and the specific flood zone designation. Here's the part that catches people off guard. FEMA mails a letter of map amendment notice to affected property owners, but the notice goes to the address on file with the county, which may not be the property address if you rent out a property or if your mailing address is a P.O. box. A significant number of property owners who have been remapped find out when their mortgage server notifies them that they are now required to carry flood insurance. Often 30 to 60 days before the server will force place a policy on their behalf at significantly higher rates than they could obtain on their own. Let me give you a specific example of how this plays out. A retired couple in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, purchased their home in 2012 in an area that was then designated Zone X, meaning outside the high-risk flood zone and not subject to mandatory flood insurance requirements. When they bought the home, their lender confirmed that flood insurance was not required. They have not carried flood insurance in 14 years. In 2026, FEMA's updated mapping places their neighborhood in Zone AE, a special flood hazard area, because updated hydrology data and sea level modeling changed the flood risk assessment for their area. FEMA's notice was mailed to their county property records address, which, for reasons related to a refinance transaction several years earlier, reflected a slightly different address format than where they actually receive mail. The notice went undelivered and was eventually returned to FEMA. The first notification they received was a letter from their mortgage servicer dated October 15th, advising them that their property was now in a special flood hazard area and that they were required to obtain flood insurance with a minimum coverage amount of $250,000. The letter gave them 30 days to provide proof of insurance, or the servicer would force place a policy on their behalf. Force-placed flood insurance rates are typically 2 to 3 times higher than policies the homeowner could obtain directly through the NFIP or through private insurers. For this couple, obtaining their own NFIP policy at an annual premium of roughly $1,400 would be straightforward. The servicer's force-placed policy quoted in the letter was $4,100 per year for the same coverage, because they received the servicer's letter with only 30 days to act, and because they did not know that they could apply for a letter of map amendment if their property's actual elevation did not support the new flood zone designation. They obtained the most convenient policy available and paid the higher NFIP direct rate. An elevation certificate that a licensed surveyor could have provided for approximately $500 might have supported a LOMA application that removed the designation entirely, saving $1,400 per year indefinitely. They did not know this option existed. Force-placed insurance, which a servicer purchases on a homeowner's behalf when required coverage is not in place, is consistently more expensive than coverage the homeowner could purchase independently and typically provides less protection. The serer's primary interest is protecting the collateral, not comprehensively covering the homeowner's interests. If your property was recently remapped or you have received any FEMA correspondence about flood zone changes, the right move is to contact an independent insurance agent about NFIP coverage options before your service or force places a policy at significantly higher cost. Additionally, if you believe the remapping is inaccurate and your property's actual elevation does not warrant flood zone designation, you can apply for a letter of map amendment or letter of map revision through FEMA to challenge the designation. This process requires an elevation certificate from a licensed surveyor, but if approved, it can remove the flood zone designation and eliminate the insurance requirement entirely. Properties that successfully obtain a LOMA often save thousands of dollars annually in insurance costs they would otherwise be required to carry indefinitely. The action step beginning now. Go to the FEMA Flood Map Service Center at msc.fema.gov and enter your property address to see the current flood zone designation for your property. If you have received any correspondence from FEMA or your SURer about a flood zone change, contact an independent insurance agent this month to understand your options before any SURer-imposed deadlines. Change number 3. The single most important date in the housing cost calendar for renters in many states this year is the notification deadline for rent increase notices that take effect January 1st. And most renters treat this as something that simply happens to them without understanding that knowing the rules in advance gives them meaningful options. In most states, landlords are required to provide written notice in advance before implementing a rent increase. The required notice period varies by state and in some states by city, but the most common standard is between 30 and 60 days advance notice for a rent increase. In California, rent increases above 10% require 90 days notice. In New York City, stabilized apartments have specific notice and increase limit requirements. In Oregon, landlords with properties subject to statewide rent stabilization must provide 90 days notice for any increase above the annual cap. The complication for renters is that lease renewal negotiations for January 1st move-in or renewal dates typically begin in October and November, which means landlords sending notice in compliance with the applicable requirement are sending that notice in October or November for a December or January effective date. By the time most renters receive notice and begin considering their options, the window to negotiate to find alternative housing or to invoke any applicable rent stabilization protections is already much shorter than it would have been if they had been monitoring the situation in advance. Here is what most renters do not know. A significant number of cities and states that do not have formal rent stabilization ordinances still have requirements that govern how and when rent increases can be implemented, and some of those requirements create leverage for negotiation that renters are not aware of. Additionally, if you live in a state or city where rent stabilization or rent control applies to your building, any rent increase above the allowable annual cap is legally invalid, and you have the right to decline paying the excess amount and to report the violation to the relevant housing agency. In 2026, the most common rent stabilization annual allowable increases range from 3 to 5% in cities across California, New York, New Jersey, Oregon, and Maryland. The action step beginning now. Find out specifically which rent laws apply in your city and state by searching your city's name plus Rent Increase Notice Requirements 2026. Review your current lease for the renewal date and any existing provisions about rent increase notice. And if you rent in a jurisdiction where rent stabilization applies, verify whether your building and unit are covered by searching your address on your city's rent board or housing authority website. Buildings constructed after a certain year are often exempt, but for renters and covered units, understanding the allowable increase cap before renewal negotiation begins is genuinely valuable information. Change number 4, and this is the resource that almost nobody uses despite being available to millions of qualifying homeowners at no cost. The U.S. Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program and its companion programs at the state level are entering their peak application and installation season, and the window to get on the priority list for fall and winter work is the next several weeks. The Weatherization Assistance Program provides free energy efficiency improvements to income qualifying households. The improvements covered include insulation installation in attics, walls, and floors, air sealing to address drafts and infiltration, heating system repairs or replacements, water heater upgrades, window and door improvements, and energy-efficient lighting. The average value of weatherization improvements provided to a qualifying household is over $7,000, and the energy savings typically reduce heating bills by 15 to 25% on an ongoing basis.